All right, now here we are on Tennis Channel Inside In, second week of Wimbledon Championship stages. Honored to have this guest on the show. It's because I've been talking to a bunch of the people here at Tennis Channel. This was on my list. She relocated from California, so it was a little hard, but anytime she's in the state, four-time year-end #1, Hall of Famer, three-time major winner, including the 99 Wimbledon run. And now a pillar in the commentary community, too. Lindsay Davenport, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for finally having me, Mitch. Jeez.
Yeah, it was like you were my white whale in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
We had to get out there and go it. But what's interesting and so fascinating is we talked to a lot of different people about Wimbledon, the championships, all these memories that they had from their playing, coaching, or commentary career. It's pretty straightforward. You had the memory. Like, there's not, what was your favorite memory? Winning in 99 over at the time, until Serena came along, the greatest of all time. Steffi Graf's last match in a major. It doesn't really get much sweeter than that.
Yeah, it was a kind of an amazing 2 weeks. And sometimes you have to have things go your way. Obviously, it's mainly about the tennis, but all the little things that can go your way also help. You know, in the beginning of my career, I was awful on grass. Lost in the first round the one time I played in juniors. Lost in qualies badly, barely won games the one time I played in the qualies. Took a few grass court lessons from some veteran players like Natalie Tauzier and Larissa Savchenko early in my career. Wasn't really sure that Wimbledon was in the cards for me. And by the time 99 rolled around, I'd played 6 or 7 years now, at least for a few weeks on the grass, and was feeling much more comfortable. We had a lot of rain those 2 weeks, a lot of rain. The schedule kind of worked out in my favor where I would somehow get my match in because I was scheduled early. There were no roofs back then on center or court #1. So big backlog of matches. And by the time I got to the final, really it can go either way where you get to a final and you're so nervous. I was walking out there against Steffi. I mean, it was like, she's an enormous favorite. I'd never been to this stage at Wimbledon. And for some reason, I was able to lock in and just play great tennis. Right at the time in the second set where we were on serve, I had won the first set. I think it was around 3-all, maybe 3-2. There was a slight rain delay. And I always look back at that. For some players that are up, it can kind of change the momentum the wrong way. But I came off the court, and it definitely helped me. I remember saying to my coach, Robert, at the time, like, holy crap. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And I remember he just looked at me, and he's like, I'm telling you, you got this. He's like, XYZ, but this is your match. You can do this. And I just remember that kind of settling me down. And when I went back out there, I had that attitude of, I can do this.
That's crazy it's very, forthright when you say that. Like, a lot of players would take the delay and think about it. Like, I haven't won this tournament before. I'm playing a legend. But you hit the reset button, caught your breath, and were able to hold it. And also winning the doubles that year with Trina Moraro. And I bring that up because another tremendous accomplishment. You won both in the same year. I don't know if we're going to see that ever in the near future.
Yeah, the Williams were able to do that pretty comfortably also. But it was so crazy. I won the women's singles. There was more rain scheduled. We played actually on Sunday because of all the rain. And so Pete and Andre were like waiting there on the court to go in right when we were done. I mean, I knew, I'm like, the forecast must not be great. I got to the locker room, was able to celebrate for basically all of 10 minutes. And the referee was there like, can we please get your doubles on? No one wanted to come back on Monday. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I didn't even go to press immediately. It was right back out onto court #1 for the doubles final. I come off that. Pete had just won. And they were trying to get us to do a photo shoot. Pete didn't want to come back Monday for anything either. So everything happened kind of in a whirl. And then also in the locker room, there was a lady there with like 5 or 6 dresses. I didn't pack a dress. I thought, no way in hell was I going to go to the Wimbledon ball. So everything kind of happened. Then next thing I knew, we were off to the Wimbledon ball. And so maybe not your traditional way of winning it where you have for the women a lot of times, 24, 36 hours before you go celebrate. It all kind of got sped up for me.
And 2 SoCal kids, you and Pete winning Wimbledon that year. I know Pete had a bunch, so it wasn't, but like that's got to be a cool feeling as well that from the area. And we can talk about maybe like what's in the water out here at the time, but it was, and it still is, but at the time when you came up and following the waves of Pete, Tracy Austin before that California hotbed was just exceptional.
Yeah, even more so than that. We all grew up in the same club, like in Palos Verdes, the Jack Kramer Club. We all spent time, all 3 of us, with Robert Lansdorp as well. So it was really kind of interesting. Pete's youngest sister, Marion, was closer to my age than Pete was, and I spent a lot of time practicing with her. I knew the family pretty well. So it is kind of cool when you look back and think of, similar to Nick Bollettieri and what he did for a lot of players on the East Coast, Robert Lansdorp really did a tremendous amount for those of us developing our games on the West Coast in Southern Cal. And we all you feel like you're part of like a little sorority fraternity or whatever, just like a little group when you come through the same area. And so it was pretty awesome to win with Pete.
I have to also add, just to put a bow on this, it's got to be cool to see the player that you beat, Steffi Graf. This past year, she was following your footsteps getting into hockey. I saw her at all the Vegas games. So her and Andre are just, representing the Knights now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You've got to be a sports fan when you're involved in professional sports. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had some kind of like ownership deal. They're also in Vegas with the Golden Knights, but, they're awesome. And she was a remarkable champion. Different than, all these champions have their own kind of personality, but something that drove Steffi was just her utter refusal to lose. And she was so good at that. I remember when we were leaving the court, you do these interviews and Bud Collins was talking to Steffi first. I couldn't hear it. I was just held a few feet away. And then when Steffi was done, he called me over and Bud said, "So Steffi says that's her last Wimbledon." I was like, what? And I remember coming off the court and I just won Wimbledon. And that was like the question. I was like, no way. She's like 29. I think she maybe had just turned 30 like the week before. Yeah. And remember thinking, gosh, she just won the French, the final of Wimbledon. And she just was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here.
I just respect it. I mean, she played enough tennis. That was it. And she went out on her own terms. Well, as we kind of transition to what's going on the current day, and I always ask this with former players, but your thoughts on kind of how the game and the shape of the game has gone, because from the outside, my perspective, I feel like the depth and the middle level of the WTA is as strong as it's been since I've started following it. We're trying to transition to new champions, and some have set themselves apart. But do you see it the same way that the mid-level, like some of these not even seeded players, are as good as any top 10 player?
Yeah, no question. And I think it was a huge move for both tours to go to 32 seeds. When they did, it was like when I played for most of my career, it was only 16 seeds at the majors, and they just didn't feel the depth was there. And somewhere along the line, they felt it was. And there's no question the players ranked 20 through about 80 are much more skilled. And I also think the overall athleticism across the board. Right. Of course, we like Steffi or Martina Navratilova. Of course, the Williams. Of course, we've had those players come through that have just been off the charts great athletes.
They might have stood out more back then.
Yes, but then now you look across the rankings and you look at everyone and you think, gosh, they could have been successful in any sport they chose. That wasn't always the case. At certain points, there was great players. I'm really waiting, and it's starting to happen on the women's side. It love to have the rivalries, but you need the absolute best players playing each other in the biggest matches. That is something that hasn't been there in women's tennis in the last 7-8 years or so. That I'm really excited about. I hope also we get all the players, the top players, the big names back competing regularly and healthy. Osaka's, given indication she's going to come back after having a child. That would really give a bigger boost even to women's tennis. Hopefully we even get the players that are taking breaks right now that needed them, Muguruza or Anisimova. There's a whole host of them. Yeah. Level-wise, I think that the players at the top are playing at an exceptionally high level. But, I look back, I remember watching a match about 6 months ago, and I think it was Capriati and Serena from the U.S. Open. I'm going to get the year wrong, so call it 20-some years ago. Okay. And gosh, that seemed like, those two athletes playing each other. So there were pockets of kind of great tennis, 20-some years ago, but I think across the board and across all rounds, it's pretty high level these days.
Yeah, and you can look at the numbers by names. I'm with you, by the way. I think 32 is great because I don't think it's necessarily fair for a 17 seed to draw like Djokovic.
Listen, it happened to me twice. Really? I played the 17 seed in the first round, and it sucked.
I know.
So let me tell you,
I'm like, anybody.
How is this happening to me?
Yeah.
It didn't seem right.
Yeah, the argument that you can have great first round matches still with one versus.
Not fair to those players that worked so hard for that ranking.
Well, the match that it's funny because I have two sets of notes. I had to throw the other ones out because we're recording literally right after Ons Jabeur pulled another comeback trail, and she's just collecting. I mean, Djokovic called it scalps the other day. I won't go that far, but she's beaten 3 straight major champions, 2 Wimbledon champions on the trial, along with Sabalenka. How she did it down 4-3, a set and a break in the second, and really chopping down Sabalenka. I always marvel at what Ons does on the court, Lindsay. But the fight and the variety, she's a true problem solver. Like, she doesn't have one plan and then that's it. She really figures it out. And you could not ask for a better ambassador for the sport than what Ons Jabeur is.
Truly. I mean, you've yet to meet anybody, player, an official, someone who works in the game, that has a negative word to say about her. And that to me is something she should be most proud of. Everybody adores her that is lucky enough to get to know her. You watch her play and you could see a couple of years ago she was different. And sometimes, in the commentary booth, you're pulling your hair out. Why are you trying that shot? Like 3 or 4 years ago. Then I started listening more to her interviews and her talking about how the freedom and she doesn't want to get bored and how, her coach Isam has really kind of adapted everything towards her to try and let her thrive in the environment that she's most comfortable in. That says a lot about kind of the working relationship that goes on behind the scenes. The thing that I'm just most, and I say proud even though I don't know her, that gets me the most excited watching her is how she's kind of overcome her own self-doubt. And, there have been matches before where she's just kind of put her head down and hasn't liked the way she's played. And I don't like to say go away because she's trying, but hasn't really dug her heels in.
Yeah.
I mean, that is 2 wins in a row. Down the first set to Rybakina, loses the first set to Sabalenka. She even went as far as to getting down a break against Sabalenka, but she stayed the course. She easily could have just kind of said like, this isn't meant to be again. I had my chance last year. She didn't. And she's given herself another chance, which has been pretty awesome. Love to see the improvements players make from year to year.
For sure.
Sometimes it's getting in better shape. Sometimes it's a certain shot. Other times it's overcoming their own fears. And it's been fun to see that with Jabeur.
I mean, I'm super impressed with her health holding up because there was 2 months ago, we were like, what's the form going into the French Open? She's coming off an injury, had some lackluster results that were deliberately held back, but she found something at RG. And tennis players, like it builds. She built on that. She had momentum, and she's looking better than ever. I completely agree. The serve was the other part that I think she's really worked on. Yeah,
getting some kind of free, kind of tricky first points with the first serve. But so Andy Roddick always, he taught me, when you get down under in the beginning of the year, you do the eyeball test. You can tell by looking around in the locker room who has done the work, who has not. And I remember him telling me that, I mean, how many years ago now, 20 or whatever it's been. He's like, I could tell when I got to Australia. Like I knew this was him talking that I put in a lot of hard work in the off season. I didn't want anyone to outwork me. And I could look around and see who's done that. It was so interesting when Jabeur took the court in Australia, her knee was heavily taped. She wasn't as fit as we'd seen previously. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, she's really injured. Like she came into Australia, she didn't play well. It was a couple days later, she announced she had to have surgery on her knee, had put it off to try and play well in Australia. Then we saw her show up in Indian Wells. She had to pull out of, her favorite swing in February, the tournaments in the Middle East. She shows up in Indian Wells, still not really quite ready, but she talked about, I didn't want to miss more time. I wanted to start getting my game in gear. Then she started to play a little better in April, and then her calf. So you're thinking, gosh, this has really been kind of a nightmare year for Ons. And again, something else she's had to overcome, right? These major injuries. She even had surgery this year, but she's worked hard. She's now obviously in much better physical shape than she was to start the year. And it's paying off with another chance to win a Grand Slam title.
Calf look good when she's jumping, kicking the tennis ball.
Yeah, exactly, right? And that can be a tough injury to get over. But really, she's gone through a lot and really, really happy for her.
I'm also impressed, too. I mean, how much she enjoys being out there, the flair that she has, which is great to see. She's got people outside the tennis bubble. Like, my sister will text me about Ons Jabeur, and she's not like a diehard like that. But, I just, the love she has for the game, the fact that she also, I mean, every metric there is for tennis players from where she's from, she has. Like, you can find a stat, she is that player. And it's almost being taken for granted in a way. Like, this is a true pioneer. That word gets thrown around a lot, but she really has walked through the door for the first time in a lot of regards.
Yeah, and it's something that when I'm commentating her matches, it's like I'm so hesitant to even discuss it too much because it just seems like I have no idea. I mean, we read about everything she had to go through, how just unprecedented her as a female also growing up in that area, not having the access to a lot of tennis courts in Tunisia, her refusal to kind of move away and do the academy thing at a young age, how far her parents would have to drive just to find a tennis court. It's really kind of overwhelming. You almost feel, I almost feel like so bad I could just walk out and just walk onto a tennis court publicly in the United States anytime that, I felt like practicing. So, everything that she's done. I mean, how many doors that she's opening for Arab women, for African women, all of it is got to be overwhelming for her. And there's obviously that series on Netflix.
Yeah.
Breakpoint. I always want to say Point Break. So it always
movie.
takes me a second. Exactly.
It's just that Neptune's Nest a little bit ago.
Exactly.
So,
don't get this messed up on Breakpoint. She was the player I learned the most about in seeing those kind of images and the footage from her off the court with her husband and her team. And that was awesome to even get that kind of glimpse into her and how she kind of tries to handle everything and how truly famous and well-known she is in her area.
Puts the Wimbledon championship photo on her phone the second she loses. Now she's back in the final. It's just tremendous stuff.
Yeah.
For Aryna Sabalenka, it was, a heartbreaking loss, one match away from number one, but still the consistency, 3 straight major semifinals. Tough way to go out, but her game is so fascinating because there are pitfalls. She can kind of, go south in a lot of ways, but the power is still otherworldly. She's, I guess, prone to some swings, I would say, but there's still a lot of just clay to be molded, I think, which is scary to think based on what she's already accomplished.
Yeah, she's taken a lot of steps forward, but I got to tell you, there's going to be a lot of scar tissue left over from the Roland Garros defeat and now the Wimbledon defeat. Match point in the semifinals of Roland Garros. She had taken control of that match up 5-2 in the third, then lost 20 of the next 24 points.
Yeah.
Just kind of came unglued. We saw the old Aryna in that match. Came back at this Wimbledon. She seemed to be really focused, seemed to be able to put that behind her. But I don't know, up a set, then 4-2, then serving 4-3, a couple of points for 5-3. And all of a sudden, just the same thing. She was, kind of falling over and not being stable with her body. She was looking around more. It kind of rattled her again. So now missed the chance to be number one by 1 set. She's missed the chance to play in a Wimbledon final, just like she missed the chance to play in a Roland Garros final. So there's a lot there for her to have to process. I mean, sometimes it's easier to just lose like 2-2. And I know that sounds terrible, but for a tennis player, maybe easier to process come the next major. She's bounced back before. She's put probably the most work in that all these top players have put in. But there's going to be some more stuff for her to have to work through if she's going to win a second major.
More with Lindsay Davenport here on Tennis Channel Inside In. We're going to have another first-time major champion. We're going to have our third major champion of 2023. Because it will be Ons Jabeur versus Market Vondrousova. Vondrousova in her second major final at age 24 had never made it past the second round of Wimbledon, and here she is in the final. And I got to say, watched every second of that Svitolina match. There was a little dipping, obviously, in the second set, but she played pretty lights out and played with the full bag of tricks, a lot of variety, had a great serving day, was feeling it in the lack of a better term. But for Vondrousova, another one of those, like we said, mid-level players that wasn't seeded, had the injury stuff, didn't look like an unseeded player today.
No, and I think that all changed with her win against Pegula. I didn't think watching her play Pegula that she actually thought she could win that match. I think
it was a crazy match.
There was all this pressure on Pegula to try and get to her first semi. She had lost, I believe it was 6 quarterfinals in the Grand Slam stage up to that point. She really wanted it, and here comes Vondrousova, who's like, well, I cannot believe I'm in a Grand Slam, especially Wimbledon quarterfinal right now. Let's just play. Oh, I'm down 1-4 in the third. And all of a sudden, she just started to get a little bit sharper. Pegula took her foot off the gas a little bit, and here she comes into a semi. Was curious how Vondrousova would feel in the semi. Much different against Svitolina than if it had been Swiatek. I think Swiatek would have been a much bigger challenge for her, and Svitolina, though, looked exhausted in this match. I think more so emotionally. Huge win over Azarenka, and then a monster win over Swiatek. And she played, unfortunately for Svitolina, the worst match so far at Wimbledon for her. And it turned out to be in the semifinal. And Vondrousova, solid as can be. The forehand was working until she got a little tight in the second. But a huge credit to her for being able to pull through those final 2 games. And, you could see it in her face afterwards. Like, I cannot believe this. Like, it's a lot for her. But gosh, now going into the final, that's the job of her team to convince her you can win this. And I think she has a better chance against Jabeur than she would have against Sabalenka with all that power.
I mean, she makes the French Open final in 19, and, the draw opened up, but she was an unknown. And then it didn't kind of happen. There was injuries, issues. She's still someone that is an Olympic silver medalist, has had some big wins, beat Jabeur twice this year. I know she wasn't in the same form, but this isn't a player that's just completely out of nowhere. Like, she's played and beaten some of the very best. So I think there is an opportunity here. I agree. I just wanted your perspective, too, as someone that's perfect to ask. Were there days when you woke up and you know, like, okay, I'm feeling it serve-wise? Because I feel like with some of these players, Vondrousova especially today early, like the serve was going higher rate than most. Like, were there days, did it take warm-ups, a couple games? When do you know when you're in like that service zone?
I think for every player, it's a little different. For me, it would be after the first game. I always felt like, and that doesn't make any sense. And I know things can get better over the course of the match. Listen, I never said that.
No,
I wasn't crazy
good. Yeah.
mentally, but it would, if I could go out there, and I always felt like it was really important for me to be ready to go in the first service game. So, you know, everything I would do in warm-up would be to, okay, I want to be able in the very first game to serve again, we're talking many, many moons ago, 105 to 110 right out of the gate.
There's a lot of players that would love that.
Well, I saw a lot of 120 pluses here this tournament. I wasn't able to do that. But, and then you felt like, okay, if I could do that, then I would feel a lot better about my serve. And so, different players, I do think that's one thing across the WTA that could and should change is a little bit more pride, take a little bit more pride in hanging on to your serve. You don't have to be super tall to have a great serve. You can still have an effective serve if you learn the different spins, if you learn to kind of master all the placements. I was always taught when you step to the line, of course you have your favorite serves, but you have to be able to serve to your opponent's weaknesses also. And if your favorite serve, let's say, is go to the forehand and your opponent doesn't have a good backhand, if it's 4-all in the third break point, you better be confident enough to go to the backhand. So I was always really diligent in practicing every serve to every location. So when I gave myself a chance to be able to go any which way, I just feel like some of the players maybe don't do enough of that, and maybe some of the players that maybe aren't as tall. But, for the most part, on this surface, it helps so much if you can step to the line and know you can hold.
It's more to serving. It's a great lesson, more to serving than MPH or KPH if you're not American. No, it's true, and props to Vondrousova against Svitolina. Just a tremendous run, fought so hard, which is no secret there. And really, having a child and coming back with this door open, really, Kim Clijsters is the first one in this modern era. I mean, I know you had your child too as well. All these women like yourself that come through and prove that you can have a child, come back, still play your best or close to your best level. It's going to be a very cool thing to see the emerging moms. Because I just remember, 5-6 years ago, hardly any new mothers on tour, and now there's a growing number.
Obviously Serena kind of changed that narrative when you have the most famous female athlete of all time have a baby and then come back at a really high level, made a number of Grand Slam finals. We also had Azarenka as well. Here comes Osaka. At least she's given every indication she wants to come back. I'm not sure we can convince Barty to come back, but that would be super cool.
Do you think the focus too is what I was kind of thinking? Like when you come back, it's a commitment, right? You don't have the luxury of just, I'm going to come back and play a little. It's like you don't have to come back, but if you do, okay, better be sharp here because you have other pressing issues.
It's interesting in how these players try and manage it. I was put in a situation where my husband couldn't travel. And so we I definitely took a couple steps back of playing a full schedule just because was not going to be on the road, taking, our son away all the time. So everybody's different. Taylor Townsend had a great interview about it. I read this, last year at some point, and she's like, listen, the reality is for most of us that choose to have a baby and go back to work, we do not have the resources to be able to just travel with our kid. Wouldn't that be nice? And she was basically saying, gosh, I would love it if I was Serena or Azarenka or whoever to be able to afford to do that. But the reality is I can't. So for me to come back on this tour, I have to leave Aiden, my son, at home most of the time. And that is really hard also. So I think for certain players that may be lower in the ranks, it's not a great feasible option sometimes. We're seeing some of the higher ranked players, the players that earn more, be able to do it with a little bit more frequency. But it's an awesome story. And I think for players like Wozniacki, players like Osaka, players that see Svitolina come back, had her baby 8 months ago, ready to go, has the support of her husband, or her baby was not at Wimbledon. That kind of inspires them. And no question that played into Wozniacki's decision a little bit.
Yeah, you can even go outside of the top sphere, Serenko, other players that have just continually came back. And it's really cool to see them. I'm happy it's trending in that direction. Vondrousova in the final, that Martina effect just still going. Like it's
lefty
just another
check.
one.
Yeah. We had Kvitova, we had her. Safarova got very close at the French Open, not so close at Wimbledon, but there's something about a lefty check We even had, I know Karolina Pliskova is a righty. She's got a twin lefty, but she was in the Wimbledon final. They grow up, I believe also, they spend some time indoors in the winter. So those courts typically a little faster, a little bit more comfortable maybe on the quick courts. But, Martina certainly has inspired and continues to inspire every single generation that comes through.
Yeah, and we're lucky to have her here. Everything's great with her, which is good.
Yeah.
A couple more things with Lindsay Davenport before we wrap this up. This has been a blast. The American women, not the strongest results, obviously. Do want to give a shout out to the player you've worked with, Madison Keys, a quarterfinal run, loses to Sabalenka, but the consistency she's had in majors has been pretty good. Like, she's up to over 90 major wins, like has gotten to the second week a bunch of times. When you look at her game, and I know, getting older in age relative to her tennis terms, what's the final step? What's the hardest step for her to get to, the very top of the top? She is right there.
Between the years. And she knows that. And those of us who are in her corner and love her to pieces, we all know that also. I mean, the steps that the turn that she was able to make from the French Open, she lost in the second round to Kayla Day, an American qualifier, to truly just thinking like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, to being able to turn it around just like that and be able to win Eastbourne, get to the quarters of Wimbledon. First set was old Madison against Sabalenka. Obviously, Sabalenka puts a lot of pressure on players, but all of a sudden, after she had won so many matches playing such structured tennis to win in Eastbourne, all of a sudden the shot selection went off against Sabalenka. That's nerves. All of a sudden we saw more backhands trying to go line early in rally. She changed that in the second set. Good sign for her that she was able to make that adjustment in mid-match in a big match. But that's what needs to change. She needs to go into some of those bigger matches just believing and playing the right way, playing the percentages. Amazing run for her. She's now back into the top 16. She was not in a good place after Paris. So hopefully she comes into which could be the most successful part of the year for her, this U.S. Open series swing, and continue with the momentum.
Yeah, it's such a long, I don't want to say slog, but a long journey as a tennis player. There's going to be ups and downs. It's staying the course, staying the fight, and also taking advantage of your opportunities. We know about the major final. There's never a guarantee you get back, so you have to keep building habits. And it was good to see her turn the page because it was a low point after the French Open, but strong run at Wimbledon. No shame in losing to Sabalenka. Same results kind of for the American women. Coco lost a tricky matchup to Kenin early, and Pegula now 0-6 in quarterfinals. These are two outstanding tennis players, but it's like that final boss in a video game. To get to that level, it takes the very best and takes a consistency that you need to have when your best game isn't there.
Yeah, one thing that troubled me most with the American results at Wimbledon was one qualifier. Just one on the men's and women's side. Only Sofia Kenin got through. Now, she's an exceptional player, but normally in years past, we would always say, the French, it's tough for us, but, get us on the faster surfaces. Then all of a sudden you're looking like, oh my gosh, we only got one through the qualies. Now we have a ton of players in the main draw, but you want to keep that developmental part going. This side, we had so many American women into the top 100. Now we got to push to get back into the top 20, back into the top 10, and kind of get those numbers up. There's a lot of really good juniors. Because my son's in the juniors, I've gotten to know so many of this. Like, we're on the verge. There's a player coming through, Darwin Blanche. He's going to be a Grand Slam champion. He's 15 years old. He's awesome. Got to the semis of the junior French. He's back in the semis of junior Wimbledon. Good things are on the horizon. I think got to give him a few more years. We'll give him some time. But the same on the women's. Clervy and Gununaway as well. She's still in Wimbledon juniors. There's a lot of positive things coming. And hopefully that generation that's there now can kind of help that transition for these youngsters coming through also.
It's tough when you follow, like this group is following. I mean, like you followed a legendary crew, and then you got the Williams sisters, and now they're following, chasing ghosts in a way. Like, it's impossible to live up to that. And there is pressure in that regard.
I think especially for the American men/boys coming through. I mean, last year at the U.S. Open, Roddick was like, can we stop saying the last American male to win a major was him? And what was it, in 2000?
20 years coming up.
Yeah, exactly, 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think we have to get over that. We've been lucky on the American women's side. We got, obviously, Venus and Serena, two of the greatest of all time that were just awesome. We had Sloane kind of pull through. I mean,
Kenin got the one,
as well. Exactly. So, but the men, we got to get that all court game developed. And Blanche has done a wonderful job developing his game. He's been in Spain the last couple of years with Ferrero. So hopefully that kind of gets it going. We have that great group now with Fritz and Tommy Paul and, Opelka, Francis. Got to get the Grand Slam trophies. You got to get those big wins.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with that anymore. Before I let you go, I did want your thoughts on Iga on the grass. Loses a tough one to Svitolina. And look, tennis is a hard sport, as you know. There were, up until the big three and Serena, specialty surfaces for players that did better and didn't have their best stuff on their worst surface. I don't think there's anything to alarm at Iga, but I wanted your perspective on why it hasn't happened on the grass and what you see could enable her to get that Wimbledon title one day.
Yeah, I mean, she's the best clay court player, no question. So what does that mean? That means she likes a little bit more time. I think also the grass just slightly negates her biggest strength, her footwork. She's got a lot of strengths, but all of a sudden it's not as easy to slide. We did see her slide on grass, but also be able to get up and change direction on that surface, something she does so well on the hard courts, but especially the clay. The most alarming thing about watching Iga was in that match against Svitolina, she just broke down emotionally. And the players in the locker room know she's so accustomed to winning. If there's any way you can stay with her and kind of keep the pressure, which is proved challenging, but keep that scoreboard pressure on, she does start to doubt herself. I mean, she was leaving the court on center court to go change, and she literally walked 50 feet out of her way to bark at her camp. I think she was talking to her psychologist, but they were all sitting there, to then walk the 50 feet back to get off the court. Changes, comes back and does the same thing. And for a player, I mean, you would never see Graf do that, right? Graf, she's maybe an exception, but what is she doing? She's one in the world. And people get upset, but just kind of to go out of her way, that part to me was like, wow, that's so strange from a number one. You get down on yourself, yes, but to walk over and show it so publicly, that was kind of alarming. But I would never count Iga out of it. She's coming back in, didn't play great leading into the U.S. Open last year. That'll be a huge point for her to really try and play better in Cincy and Canada. But we'll see what kind of pressure she feels in New York.
I know, it's got to defend that title too, and there's some new contenders on her heels. Lastly, how do you see the final? What do you see the key to the final being with Ons Jabeur and Vondrousova? Vondrousova coming in as the unexpected finalist. Ons Jabeur return trip, 3-3 head-to-head. What's the key to this matchup?
For sure the nerves for both of them. And Jabeur with a little bit of an edge there, having played in a Wimbledon final. She wants it badly. The one thing I'm concerned about with Jabeur is what she has left. I mean, she took out two of the huge favorites in Rybakina and Sabalenka. And sometimes it's happened where the player does all the hard work and they get to the final and they're just maybe a little flat. Also, let's see the start that Vondrousova gets. Does she feel free? Because she didn't play so free the last 20 minutes of that win over Svitolina. How does she handle the occasion? Didn't handle the occasion great at Roland Garros 4 years ago. She'll have that experience under her belt. We'll have time. It won't be about big serves and first strike tennis. This is going to be about creative tennis. We're going to see a lot of drop shots. But I do give the edge to Jabeur, and a huge opportunity for her to, get her first Grand Slam title, but really break down even more barriers.
It would be remarkable.
Yeah.
Lindsay Davenport, always a pleasure running into you talking tennis. Actually, I did have one more. What's the best part about being a tennis parent?
A parent? Oh my gosh, I thought you were going to say commentator.
No, parent. Besides the fact that your son's really good.
There's not a ton about being a tennis parent, I got to say. I will say I have been, you always have mentors, right? In your sport. I mean, how lucky or blessed am I that two of my best friends, Tracy Austin and Mary Jo Fernandez, older than me, have sons older than me that are amazing players. They help me so much. And Mary Jo is especially helping me kind of navigate all of this. But it's been awesome. And
do you play that card at all? When you have to be okay, because I know some sons might not always listen to their mom. Come on.
My son does. He's pretty good about that. I think it helps too. Maybe with he has a different last name. I think that kind of helps when he goes places. And obviously, if you're a McEnroe, right, or an Everett, or I mean, it is really tough if you have the name of a legend. I'm certainly not a legend, but
I mean, look, I'm not going to push back on that.
No. There's like legend, and then there's like people who were good. But no, it's been fun to kind of stay in the sport in a lot of different ways. Being here as a commentator, has been awesome.
Yeah.
You get to know players. I mean, I knew Martina a little bit on tour, but to be able to spend these last 15 years with her has been one of the biggest blessings probably of this job. And now getting into the juniors, like, now I'm like, I know these kids. You know, I'm sitting there watching, the junior slams, and it's been pretty cool.
Well, we're all rooting for Jagger and his career, and I just remember him as like a 10-year-old tall kid
all
running
around here. I know.
With the wavy
now
hair.
He's taller than me, and crazy.
Well, Lindsay, this was fun. Lindsay Davenport, great tennis commentator, also a Anaheim Ducks fan.
Yes.
Because her friend, little Marcel Dion's daughter.
Yeah, do you remember
I
that?
did,
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But when I grew up, my parents had Kings season tickets. So, and then Lisa Dion was one of my best friends before Dad Marcel got traded. That's when I learned how sports and team sports.
You didn't know who he was.
Wait, what do you mean she's leaving?
Yeah.
Like, her dad's like going to a different city. I'm like, wait, what? But no, hockey's always been one of my favorite sports.
It's the best. I mean, I don't know that I'm crazy about the Ducks thing, but
whatever. Get over it.
Yeah, we're all fans here.
It.
But and it was cool that you got to go to all those games with Will Jackson, Jagger kind of in there.
Can I tell you the season they won the Stanley Cup was the season? Was the year I was pregnant.
Yeah,
we went to watch them win the Stanley Cup on. I'm going to get the day right. I believe it was Wednesday night.
Okay,
they won it. We had some friends on the team. Timu Solani, who's a huge tennis fan, a friend of ours. Scott Niedermeyer, a friend of ours. And we're banging on the glass right in front of us when they won. I was like in tears, massively pregnant. I had Jagger 3 or 4 days later. The first time my husband left the hospital on day 2 was to go to the Niedermeyer's house because they had the Stanley Cup there.
The Cup party.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, you're leaving me? He's like, babe, I'm going to see the Stanley Cup. I'm out of here. You're fine in the hospital.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ever defend leaving just give birth wife, but Cup party, Scott Niedermeyer.
I had no chance then. He's like, I'm out.
Wow. Well, no, I appreciate any hockey fan, and honestly appreciate you spending time here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Hope to do this again in the future.
Anytime.
But best of luck to Jagger's success, and keep calling some phenomenal matches.
Thank you.